Evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology refers to the scientific study of the evolution of cognition and behavior using the main principles of natural selection. Over time, women and men have become different from each other socially, but in terms of evolutionary psychology, they are very similar because they both seek the survival of genes, maintain gender roles to a certain extent, and have a similarity in preferred traits in the other sex, such as being less physically aggressive and more nurturing. However, men and women still face different challenges due to natural selection and gene survival, which cause them to seek out different characteristics in their partners. Because men have the ability to reproduce an unlimited amount of times during their life, they seek out a partner who appears to be more fertile. Women only have a certain period of time they can reproduce during their life, so they seek out a partner who appears to be more dominant and affluent. Biology, gender, and sex. Gender is the biologically or socially influenced characteristics that we associate with males and females. Sex refers to the actual categories of male and female themselves. Differences between the two sexes can be accounted for by hormone production and reproductive functions. The hormone testosterone, which is more prevalent in males, is linked to dominance and aggression. Meanwhile, the hormone estrogen, which is more prevalent in females, is associated with sexual behavior. Although males and females both produce both hormones, they produce them at different amounts. Now, as society progresses, many individuals identify outside of their birth sex. How an individual identifies sexually can be termed as their gender identity. For example, a transgender refers to an individual whose psychological sense of being male or female differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. As one ages, they become more androgynous. Androgyny refers to the psychological traits of being masculine and being feminine mixed. Both women and men can become more or less assertive or nurturing.
So for today's activity, grab a notebook, write down 4 gender norms that comes to your mind when you think about men and women. So pause this video and come back to it as we're gonna give you some examples. So hopefully you had some time to jot down some gender norms, but some common ones that we seen a lot of people associate um, men and women to are that for women they see them as being more emotional, caring, more of a homemaker and nurturing. But for men, they see them as being more aggressive, powerful, emotionally tough, and a leader. But what gender norms are, they encourage a proper behavior. So they constitute how we act, how our mindset is, and sometimes how we dress. And they make us consider such a way to be more normal. But throughout history, we see a lot of people not to accept it and see those gender norms as being unfair and restrictive of how they should act. Because they keep an eye on others to of how they follow a certain trend, just so we can adapt to it and feel accepted by that certain society that we're living in. But norms can also change, and they're really adaptable. They differ based on environment and our culture. And throughout, even in United States history, we've seen a lot of shifts in gender norms. As an example, I have a video explaining how women were seen as being more tough during wartime. But after war ended, they were more, through media, they were more advertised as being more nurturing and a better homemaker. So I'm going to play a 30-minute segment of this video to really go in depth of this material.
If the image of a woman during World War II was Rosie the Riveter, the 1950s female ideal became Susie Homemaker. The same women who were often encouraged to work on the factories to support the war effort were now urged to demonstrate their patriotism by staying home.
If you look at the difference between the way the magazines portrayed women in the 40s and magazines portrayed women in the 50s, you can see a huge propaganda effort took place to convince women that their place was in the home, that they didn't want to wear overalls, that really you were much more fulfilled if you could cook a good dinner.
Now that we've talked about what evolutionary psychology is, I want to dive in deeper about what is nature and nurture. We've been made to believe that it is always nature versus nurture that makes us who we are instead of working together. This is when genes and environment interact. What is this interaction? It's a relationship in which the effect of one factor, such as biology, depends on another factor, such as environment. What is affected? Our personality, intellect, our mental health, and our behaviors, social and emotional ones. When it comes to the nature aspect, this is the genetic or biological factors that influence who we are, such as our physical traits, our personality, and abilities. These are inherited from our parents and determined by our DNA. For example, we see eye color or natural athletic abilities that are influenced by nature. It emphasizes how much of our development is shaped by who we or by what we are born with. When it comes to the nurturing aspect of it, this refers to the environmental factors and experiences that shape our development. This includes our upbringing, our culture, education, relationships, and social influences. So, genetic does influence potential behaviors, but the environmental ones shape how we express them. So, let's talk about cultural norms, like our biological tendencies. For example, males are expected to be tough all of the time, and women are meant to be soft and gentle and very nurturing beings. Now, this does definitely influence how we grow up and how we evolve and our mentality. We bring these into our marriages, we bring this into relationships, really any relationship. And now let's look at early child life experiences. Let's look at negative ones first. So this is like child abuse, stress, financial troubles, constant contact with verbal disputes, or positive ones like encouragement, being present when it comes to parents or families and friends, and a safe environment where a child grows up. This brings into their mentality and how children express that. So when we see a family that is not very nurturing and there's a lot of child abuse or stress involved in that family, we see that because a child becomes very stressed and that goes into their adulthood. They're very stressed beings, they have a lot of anxiety, and when versus a positive and encouraging one, there's more room for a more positive adulthood and how they know how to navigate relationships. They're more into healthier relationships. We see things like that. For me, at least, I thought that parental nurturing was more effective in how our behaviors are than peer influence. But seeing this chapter, we see truly how much peers really dominate in how a child behaves and what parts of that behavior they take into their own. So this is part of the next one. So how do peers influence behavior?
During adolescence, peer influence becomes one of the most important factors in the development of personality, behavior, and values, and many other things. Children in this stage of development are subconsciously observing what their friends, their peers, like to do, what their tastes are, what they approve of, what they disapprove of. And they are more likely to share traits with their peer group than those of what their family has raised them with. Adolescence is a time of exploration to figure out who they are as individuals. It's a time of figuring out what their own values are separate from their family. And this exploration takes place in the context of peer relationships. This is the reason why many people refer to this stage as a rebellious stage, because it may seem like the individual is abandoning and pulling away from family values and traditions while aligning themselves with their peers instead, though this is only a part truth in the fact that the values and traditions may change a little and some may be lost, but this is a time where the individual is introducing new values, new ideas into their life, and uh, putting them together with the old things they've learned from their parents as they grow up into adulthood. This is extremely important because it's allowing an individual to have their own values separate from other people while keeping previous traditions and values as well. It's an important influence on culture because the mixing of values from both the older generation and the newer generation allows for the creation of new ideas and innovation, contributing to the ever-changing nature of culture.